Chapter 531 Island Destruction. As the screams of pain rose and fell in the midst of that violet shade, explosions continuously rang in the air. Once Su Ming executed that bizarre killing move of his, the numerous violet threads crawled into the hundreds of savages still present under the blood-red screen of light, and their bodies were ripped apart by those same threads. Rivers of blood flowed on the ground, and a countless amount of shredded corpses covered the land. Once all the savages in the red screen of light died, the violet threads left their mangled corpses and flew towards Su Ming. In an instant, they gathered once again on Su Ming's body, surrounding him before turning into the violet armor and the long spear. That sight fell into the eyes of the trio outside the screen of light. Their pupils shrank. Shock and terror appeared on their faces. In truth, they were not the only ones who saw this scene. The savages that numbered to nearly 1,000 on this island outside the blood-red screen of light also saw it. Everything that had happened within the short period of time caused all the people on the island feel an indescribable fear towards Su Ming. This fear was like a nightmare, and even if they managed to live through this calamity, it would stay with them for life, causing them to be shocked out from their meditation, jolted awake from their sleep. The same scene also fell into the eyes of the old Mo Luo in the temple and the middle-aged man sitting beside him, the N shaman, Bao Shan. Their expressions differed, but the hints of shock in their eyes were similar. "What is that armor?" Bao Shan's pupils shrank and he asked under his breath. "That armor? I seem to have seen it recorded somewhere before." Mo Luo's expression was incredibly grim. Almost the instant all the eyewitnesses were shocked to the core, Su Ming lifted his head and looked towards the three people on the rune in the sky as he stood within the blood-red screen of light. With one move, he charged upwards. The trio were startled, and quickly formed a seal with both their hands before they pressed their palms on the screen of light. Immediately, the area inside it became foggy, and a bloody fog immediately filled the region, instantly becoming so thick that it could not be seen through with the naked eye. Roars and sounds of battle echoed once again in the blood-red screen of light, even though there were no longer any savages inside, and right before Su Ming's eyes, the mangled corpses on the ground grouped together to turn into a dead but moving body. The blood on the ground also gathered together to manifest into blood humans, and all of them charged towards Su Ming in a fit of madness in the fog. This was the true activation of the Great Barren Blood Rune. The more this rune killed, the stronger it would become. The fog in the rune tumbled about, and once the sounds of battle reached up, the three people outside the rune felt their hearts relax. They looked at each other, then bit the tips of their tongues and coughed out a mouthful of blood that fell on the long black blade in their midst. The blade started buzzing again. Once it absorbed the blood, a wisp of black smoke seeped out and took shape. It looked like a person, but its facial features could not be seen clearly. The trio could only tell vaguely that the smoke was a woman. She unsheathed the long black blade from its scabbard, then charged into the rune with the blade in her hand. Time passed, and in the blink of an eye, 20 breaths went by. The trio's nerves were strung high during that time. They kept their gazes fixed on the fog in the rune, and they were not the only ones. The savages outside the rune were also watching nervously. Even old Mo Luo and the N shaman, Bao Shan, did the same thing. The fog in the rune started churning even more furiously, and the roars as well as the sounds of battle reached a volume that could almost ring through the sky. Piercing whistles that sounded as if there was a blade slicing through the air also echoed about. Delight gradually appeared in the trio's eyes. They could sense that the rune's power had been activated to its full potential. Even berserkers in the later stage of the berserker soul realm would find it difficult to survive in this rune. My friends, the time has come for us to step in. Once we kill this person, we will have a huge achievement under our belts. This person must surely be a rare powerful warrior from South Morning, and if such a powerful warrior died in Xianxia Island, then who else in South Morning could hope to stand against us? As the three laughed, they began forming seals with both their hands, and their bodies slowly sank into the rune to blend into the red fog. Yet less than 10 breaths after the trio fused into the red fog, the rune started trembling, and the tremors grew more violent with each passing moment. It made all the savages around the area to be filled with anticipation in the midst of their anxiety, while their faces became twisted with ferociousness. Suddenly, the rune let out a bang, and right under the crowd's expectant gazes, they saw fine cracks appearing on the blood-red screen of light. And almost the instant these cracks appeared, the rune exploded with a loud bang that shook the sky and earth. 3 figures shot out from within as it exploded. The instant the savages around started laughing because they thought they had won, before seeing the whole process, a shrill scream of pain caused immense terror to appear within all these people, and that terror was reflected on their faces. They saw the trio rushing out of the rune, and the one who screamed was the old man who had come out last. Because before he even managed to take a few steps forward, a hand immediately shot out and grabbed his neck. As he screamed, his body abruptly exploded, turning into a large amount of flesh and blood that spilled in the air. At that moment, Su Ming walked out of the collapsed rune. He flung off the blood on his hand. At the instant he appeared and the exploding rune was swept off by the blood fog that was spreading through the entire area, he took a step forward and threw the long spear in his hand. It let out a buzz, sliced through the air, and caught up to the other old man who had now turned pale with shock and terror on his face. The spear pierced through his chest within the span of a breath. Su Ming disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was already standing before the boy, whose pupils shrank. He would never forget what he saw in the fog. He saw the woman with the long blade, the divine soldier who was personally appointed by progenitor Mo Luo, shivering as she stood before Su Ming, and as she shivered, that woman whose face was obscured prostrated herself before him. He would never forget how this person used just one gaze to form a mighty pressure that caused all the existences within the fog to instantly crumble the moment the trio stepped inside. The boy had even sensed an emotion that was completely different from the aloofness moments ago contained within that gaze. It was anger. Aloofness and bloodlust were mostly what could be seen on this person's face before he came to the island and after he stepped into the rune. That was something the boy remembered clearly, but there was no way he would have mistaken that gaze just now. It was anger. It was an anger that could burn the skies. Under it, the entire rune collapsed and the fog inside tumbled backwards. Shocked, the trio immediately chose to retreat, but in an instant, 2 of them died, and before the boy could run too far away, Su Ming walked towards him with fury seething through his entire being. "Progenitor, save me!" The boy screamed out in a shrill voice and started retreating desperately, but he still did not manage to dodge Su Ming pointing towards him with his left hand. Almost the moment the boy screamed, his cries were immediately silenced. Su Ming's left index finger was already buried deep into the center of his brows, causing the boy to explode under the power. Su Ming's white robes were dyed red with blood. As the red fog swept through the land, the savages around the area scattered desperately in the midst of their fear. Su Ming's massacre had stirred up a storm known as terror in their hearts. At that moment, there was only one thought in their minds. They could no longer be bothered about pretending not to be afraid of death. They only cared about one thing, and that was fleeing. Their cruelty was only aimed towards the weak, and fear had completely drowned their minds and souls like a tidal wave. Xianxia Island was already flowing with rivers of blood. During that instant, Su Ming did not look at the savages who were madly fleeing for their lives around him. Instead, he directed his gaze towards the temple on the mountain in the island. The instant he came here, he had immediately sensed 2 incredibly powerful presences within that temple. He flung off the blood on his long spear, then with a calm expression, walked towards the temple through the air. The candle dragon would chase after the fleeing people. Su Ming did not need to bother about them too much. He did not walk quickly. He simply approached that temple in the mountain at a leisurely pace. The ground underneath him was covered in fresh blood, and the stench of it spread through the air, causing ripples to appear on the surface of the Dead Sea around the island. It was as if the bloody stench in the air had attracted numerous ferocious beasts to the place. However, these ferocious beasts only wandered around the island, not daring to come closer. They might not possess a lot of intellect, but they could still sense the terrifying murderous aura coming from the person who had caused those rivers of blood to run freely. The sky was dark, and rain continued pouring down from above. Perhaps it was just as Su Ming had said. When he left this place, there would only be rivers of blood running on this island, and this place would serve as a warning for eastern wastelands. As he walked, the once lively Xianxia Island was now filled with a deathly silence. Only a woman's figure remained prostrated on the ground once the fog from the rune dissipated. By her side was that long blade which she had let go of. The woman's face could not be seen clearly, but her trembling body caused something to begin struggling and resisting within her mind, and a runic symbol slowly appeared on her body. That runic symbol began to shatter little by little. Su Ming's expression was dark and anger burned in his eyes. The dead boy had not been mistaken. Su Ming was indeed livid, and the source of his anger came from that indistinct woman. He was familiar with that figure. He knew her. And he hadn't expected that he would see her in this place. When Su Ming stood before the main door to the temple, he glared coldly at the scar-faced old man who was staring at him with a face as dark as thunderclouds, along with the middle-aged man beside him, who was looking at him with a complicated expression. Su Ming did not speak. He merely lifted the long spear in his right hand slowly and pointed its tip towards the two people in the temple. The old man's face turned darker and he clenched his right fist tightly before standing up. He was incredibly tall and big, and when he stood up, a mighty pressure immediately spread out from his body. Killing intent shone in his eyes. "My shaman friend Bao Shan, if you kill this person, I will return to you your freedom." Chapter 532. Island Destruction. When those words tumbled out of the old man's lips, the middle-aged man by his side stood up as well. He looked at Su Ming, then in silence, he moved, and immediately, after leaving behind an after-image in the temple, his real body walked out. He clenched his right hand into a fist, and a powerful presence erupted forth from his body. There were even banging sounds reverberating from within him when he prepared to ram his fist onto the ground. "I am Bao Shan, and I am an end-battle thought soothsayer." The instant he said those words, his fist crashed onto the ground, but the ground did not shudder. Instead, an aura that surged into the sky exploded from under Bao Shan's feet. That aura was incredibly pure, and it was clearly the power of the world. At the same moment, Bao Shan's hair turned white. Several wrinkles appeared on his face, and he looked as if he had exchanged his soul with someone else, giving the impression that Su Ming was facing off against a battle shaman. When lives return to Earth, I predict that I will become a battle shaman and fight. Banging sounds reverberated violently from within his body. As he lifted his head, veins popped up on his face, and he took a step toward Su Ming. He approached him, and an imposing presence that could topple mountains and overturn seas erupted from his body and crashed down against Su Ming. Almost the moment Bao Shan walked out, a glint appeared in Mo Luo's eyes as he stood in the temple. He lifted his right hand, and immediately, black light spread out to instantly cover his whole body. His eyes turned dark and cold as he glared at Su Ming. Bao Shan's punch contained the full power of an end-battle shaman. At the moment he hurled it outward, numerous cracks instantly appeared in the air between him and Su Ming, as if it could no longer withstand the force of the blast and was about to crumble. Su Ming lifted his right hand, and the long spear in his grip started shining with violet light. He swung that spear towards Bao Shan, and at the same time, he lifted his left hand and seized the air in the direction of the sky. Immediately, a vortex began churning and roaring in the sky, stirring up a huge gust of wind that charged towards Su Ming's left hand. Once he held it, he felt as if he was holding onto an endless amount of whirlwinds in his grasp. The moment his long spear crashed into Bao Shan and a rumbling sound reverberated in the air, Su Ming pressed his left palm towards the shaman, bringing along all the whirlwinds in his hand as well. Rumbling sounds echoed in the air, and golden light circulated in Su Ming's body under the violet armor. At that moment, a mighty force erupted from all his berserker bones simultaneously. At the same time, as he took that one step forward, his body instantly disappeared from the spot. When he reappeared, he was already beside Bao Shan. Lightning sparks swam all over the purple armor on his body. It was naturally Su Ming's power as the lightning berserker, and it was blasting out from his body at that moment. The lightning sparks let out thunderous rumbles and covered the entire area in the blink of an eye. When Bao Shan was surrounded by them, Su Ming formed a seal with his left hand, and a profound gaze appeared in his eyes. Black wisps of smoke seeped out of his left hand, twirling around his palm like a black bundle of hair. Then, Su Ming pressed his left palm towards Bao Shan, who was currently surrounded by thunderous lightning. The black threads were the manifestation of Su Ming's epiphany towards the power of the Candle Dragon's curse. As they spread out from the gaps of his fingers and he pressed his palm towards Bao Shan, the End Shaman swiftly spun his body around. His pupils constricted, but he did not fight back against that palm strike. Instead, he lifted his right leg and stomped down with his foot. When Earth is affected by the sky, I foresee that I will become a soul catcher." A black air pillar immediately shot up from under Bao Shan's feet. Once it enveloped him within, his hair immediately turned from white to red. His face also became much older, but his gaze instantly turned as deep as the abyss. An incredibly pure presence that belonged to soul catchers erupted from his body. When Su Ming pressed his palm forward, Bao Shan lifted his right hand and formed a seal. Similar wisps of black smoke appeared on his palm. That black smoke might be incredibly faint, but the same power of the curse as Su Ming's could be felt from it. At the instant their palms came into contact, Mo Luo's body was completely covered by that black light, and killing intent shone brilliantly in his eyes. "If you can hold him captive, then you are free." Mo Luo let out a low shout, then took a step forward, and he traveled so quickly that he arrived before Su Ming in the blink of an eye. At the instant he closed in, Su Ming's eyes flickered. He had been able to tell since a long time ago that something was slightly off. This old Mo Luo had refused to walk out of the temple since the start, and even when he was slaughtering all the people on the island, this person had not attacked. All of this was definitely connected to this temple. That was why Su Ming had not stepped inside just now. He had instead lifted that long spear while still outside, and even though he was fighting against Bao Shan, he had always been waiting for the moment this old man would walk out of the temple. Even if the old man refused to walk out, Su Ming would still have ways to lure him out, and he was certain that once he revealed a weakness, this person would definitely not stand by and do nothing. During the previous moment in his fight against Bao Shan, Su Ming had finally managed to lure the old Mo Luo out of the temple, and almost the moment he walked out, Su Ming's eyes sparkled. But just as he was about to retreat, suddenly, a decisive expression appeared on Bao Shan's face, and he closed his eyes without any hesitation. Once he closed his eyes and reopened them, 5 words tumbled out of Bao Shan's mouth. "The sky provides for all." The instant he said those words, illusory shadows instantly appeared out of thin air around Su Ming. There were men and women, elderly and young among the shadows, but they were not vengeful spirits. All of them looked practically similar to each other. It did not matter whether it was the men or the women, the young or the old, they all had the same faces. The only difference between them was the different body structures, as well as the different signs of time marking their faces. These shadows seemed endless in Su Ming's eyes, and they numbered to so many that he felt as if he had sunk into an illusion. What shocked him was that he could clearly feel his own face changing rapidly, as if he was about to blend into the crowd. This was the first time Su Ming had ran into such a strange divine ability. Almost the instant he was trapped by Bao Shan's spell, Mo Luo walked out of the temple, and the black smoke from his entire body spread out to turn into fog in midair before charging straight towards Su Ming. By the looks of it, it wanted to gather around him. By the time Su Ming realized it, the black fog had already closed in on him and surrounded him. It shrank abruptly, and looked as if it was about to solidify. Once that fog completely gathered around Su Ming, it would envelop him within and turn into a statue. That statue was naturally Mo Luo's statue of the god of berserkers. This divine ability was one of his best killing moves, Berserker Soul Rip. However, if Su Ming had the courage to come to Scour Civ Island and lure out Mo Luo by fighting against Bao Shan, then he naturally had made preparations. Almost the moment he noticed himself being trapped among the bizarre and strange people, he lifted his left hand, its palm turned towards the sky. "Past, future, fuse together and become destiny," he declared calmly. When he mumbled out these words, the black fog had already had him completely surrounded, and a huge statue had manifested around him. "Rip!" A ferocious look appeared on Mo Luo's face, and he immediately let out a low roar. Yet the moment his voice traveled through the air, the statue around Su Ming exploded, and as it exploded, Bao Shan's face turned pale. He took a few steps back in succession, and as blood trickled out of the corners of his lips, he noticed that his spell of having the sky provide for all had been forcefully broken through. At the same time, a teenager slowly walked out from the crumbling statue, and he had half a head of white hair, and the other purple. As that person appeared, a power that caused the universe to be turned upside down, caused the world to be drained off all color, caused the heavens to close their eyes emerged, destiny's power. "Since you're here now, don't even think about going back anymore." A hint of youth could be heard in the chilling voice. The instant Su Ming spoke those words, he lifted his head and looked towards Mo Luo and Bao Shan. When they saw his gaze, their hearts trembled simultaneously. Chapter 533: Mo Luo's Misunderstanding. Before Su Ming turned into destiny, he had a seventh of all his bones turned into berserker bones and possessed the Wind Berserker and Lightning Berserker's inheritance. With the help of his large supply of enchanted treasures, he could surpass a normal powerful berserker in the Berserker Soul Realm, and his combat abilities could even catch up to a berserker in the later stage of the Berserker Soul Realm. Even if he could not win against those in the later stage of the Berserker Soul Realm, he could still win against all those who were below that stage. Once he turned into destiny, due to his mastery towards the power between the past and the future and his understanding towards the law governing binary opposites, his strange divine ability of making the past and future intersect with each other could make his combat abilities increase infinitely. And with all his skills, his presence would increase so greatly that he would be close to those who had attained great completion in the Berserker Soul Realm. However, the time allowed for him to remain in this state every single time he turned into destiny was only 15 breaths. Even if Su Ming had been training for years in the frozen world and had prolonged his time as destiny for about 1 or 2 breaths, the duration would still not go past 20 breaths. Yet even so, that time was still enough for Su Ming to become an incredibly powerful existence in the world. Even if he could only last for a dozen-something breaths in this state, it was still enough for him to command the world as he pleased. The instant he turned into destiny, Su Ming walked out of Mo Luo's collapsing statue of the god of berserkers. As he moved forward, he seemed as if he was still far in the distance, but in truth, with just one step, he had already arrived before Bao Shan. Bao Shan's pupils constricted. Almost the instant the teenager Su Ming walked towards him, he swiftly took a step back without any hesitation. Yet as he did so, he immediately saw Su Ming lifting his left hand while walking over, and with that aloof expression on his face, he swung his arm. Bao Shan felt as if the world before him had frozen and shattered into pieces. Piercing howls were mixed with the rumbling sounds booming by his ears, causing the world he saw to shatter into pieces before it regrouped. However, when his vision was restored, it felt as if time had flowed backwards. He should have been moving back, but right before his own eyes, he saw his body moving forward against his will as the world's time flowed in reverse. He was not retreating, but was instead taking a step forward as if his movements were reversing. This bizarre experience made shock appear in Bao Shan's eyes. With his current level of cultivation, he could tell with a single glance just what sort of unbelievable power was contained in this. This is time reversal. When shock overcame Bao Shan, only then did Su Ming's words when he waved his arm reached his ears. My left hand represents the past. In Mo Luo's eyes, this scene was different. He saw Bao Shan moving backwards, but before his foot even landed, he immediately took a step forward, and by the looks of it, he seemed as if he was voluntarily walking right towards Su Ming's right index finger as Su Ming moved towards him. He also noticed a strong power of the world rippling in the area at that instant. The signs of time reversing made fine cracks in the void, even making the blood on the ground flow backwards. All of this seemed to have happened slowly, but when Mo Luo eventually registered what was going on, he saw Bao Shan touching Su Ming's right index finger. He did not show any signs of resistance or struggle whatsoever, and with a bang, he coughed out fresh blood and fell backwards. But that was not the end. Mo Luo's shock and astonishment was far from ending. He saw another scene that made his skin crawl, and even if he had already reached the pinnacle in the later stage of the Berserker Soul Realm, he still felt chills running down his spine, and he felt fear growing in him towards Su Ming. He saw Bao Shan coughing out blood and falling backwards, then Su Ming taking a step forward aloofly, but right at the moment his foot landed, he lifted his left hand and waved his hand again. The tumbling Bao Shan froze in midair, and as if everything was going to reverse again, his body no longer tumbled backwards. He charged towards Su Ming, and the blood he had coughed out gathered in midair, turning into blood drops that went back into Bao Shan's mouth. Then, it was Su Ming jabbing his finger into Bao Shan's body again as he moved forward. The first jab was on Bao Shan's chest, the second at the center of his brows, and the third on the shaman's throat. The 3 jabs seemed like they had happened through several cycles, but in truth they had only taken an instant. After that instant, Bao Shan let out a muffled groan. He coughed out several mouthfuls of blood, and his body fell to the ground in the distance with a bang. His face turned pale from shock and terror. Blood trickled down the corners of his lips, and just as he was about to stand up and retreat, he did not notice the cold smile on Su Ming's lips. Neither did he notice the candle dragon's mouth suddenly appearing behind him. Bao Shan struggled to stand up. With his heart in shock and his fear full of disbelief written clearly on his face, he felt a strong, intense sense of danger coming towards him, but he could not dodge it, and everything turned dark. The small snake had transformed into the candle dragon and devoured Bao Shan. Its huge body showed up in the sky, and it let out a loud, rumbling roar towards the heavens. Great completion in the Berserker Soul Realm. You've reached the great completion in the Berserker Soul Realm. Mo Luo's eyes went wide and a huge storm raged in his heart. He had had a hunch previously, but he had thought that it was because of the violet armor. In truth, that was indeed the case. The Undertaker of Evil's armor did not possess any form of defensive abilities. It only had one function, and that was to attack, attack, and attack. With that armor equipped, a person would be filled with murderous aura. If that person's will was not strong enough, he or she would be immediately overcome by murderous intent and turn into a puppet without intelligence that only knew how to kill. Yet even so, that armor could make a person's combat powers rise exponentially and make them bring out a level of strength that far surpassed their level of cultivation. That was why Su Ming had given Mo Luo a feeling that he was incredibly troublesome. It was why he did not venture out so readily. Instead, he wanted to wait for him to continuously weaken. Yet now, even though Su Ming was without the armor before his eyes, that strange divine ability, that terrifying time reversal, and the shocking 3 jabs had made Mo Luo realize to his shock that this person could not even be considered terrifying when he was in that armor. This appearance of his when half his hair was white and the other purple, and when he was without the armor, was his absolute strongest. With just 3 jabs, he managed to critically injure an Nen shaman. This was something Mo Luo could not do. In his eyes, the only ones who could do such a thing were those rare old monsters who had attained great completion in the Berserker Soul Realm. Only these people would possess such astonishing power and would have the strength to kill an Nen shaman with just 3 jabs. His from South Morning. Could he be that is one of the 3 great powerful berserkers in South Morning? Among the 3 great berserkers, Xianxia is said to be an old monster, and it's the same for Guru Li Long. Only the mysterious 3rd powerful berserker remains a mystery despite our investigations. Could he be that person? Mo Luo's face turned stark pale, his heart pounded against his chest, and his skin crawled. The instant this thought appeared in his heart, he hastily retreated without any hesitation, charging straight back to the temple. He came from Eastern Wastelands, and his status was different from the others on the island. The reason he came to this island was because he was tasked with investigating the 3 great berserkers of South Morning. At that moment, he was already a 7th certain that this Su Ming was the mysterious 3rd great berserker of South Morning. How would he dare fight with such an assumption in his head? His only thought right now was to return to the temple immediately. Only when he was there would he have the power to protect himself. After all, this temple was the great enchanted vessel he had received from his clan after being given this mission. However, once Su Ming lured him out, there was no way he would give him the chance to return. Almost the instant Mo Luo began retreating, charging towards the temple without any care towards the world, Su Ming looked towards him with a chilling glare, and the next instant, he disappeared. Only 5 breaths had gone by since Su Ming transformed into destiny. The moment Mo Luo saw Su Ming disappearing, his pupils shrank, and in his fear, he let out a roar, knowing that it would be difficult for him to return to the temple. Without any hesitation, he lifted his right hand and slammed his palm against his chest. Once he did so, he opened his mouth and spat out a yellow ray of light. At the instant that light appeared, a vast amount of power immediately began churning in the area, stirring up an endless wave of ripples in the air around him. Almost the instant Su Ming appeared beside Mo Luo, the old man lifted his left hand and pointed towards the yellow ray of light. Great Yu South Morus Alba Palace, manifestation of ancients. Mo Luo roared. He still clearly remembered the strange changes that had happened to Bao Shan before this person, and he was afraid he would end up the same way. At that moment, he had practically brought out his full power to execute this art. Even if you've attained great completion in the Berserker Soul Realm, but the source of the Berserker's power come from the Great Yu Temple, and in its presence, even you will be trapped. You won't be able to stop me from returning inside. Mo Luo executed the art with his full power. He was incredibly confident in this divine ability, which was really a form of an enchanted treasure. Ever since his clan had given him this treasure, he had fused it with his body. There were many who died in his hands because of this art, and he was confident that even if he could not kill Su Ming, he could still trap him for some time. That amount of time would be enough for him to return to the temple, and when he increased his power with the temple, he could either fight against Su Ming or retreat and activate a rune to escape from this place. He could even summon Sir Mo Qiu to help him. When he remembered how terrified he had been towards Sir Mo Qiu's presence and how he had been unable to bring up any power to resist him, Mo Luo suddenly became incredibly interested and excited towards killing South Morning's 3 great berserkers. In an instant, the yellow light became so bright that it was piercing to the eyes, the clouds in the sky disappeared, and the blood on the ground vanished. A huge palace appeared in the world. It was an incredibly extravagantly built palace, and as the light flowed towards the area, a couple words could be seen carved clearly on the tablet placed right before the building. Great Yu South Morus Alba. When that palace appeared, a feeling of ancientness and a primitive power that made people feel as if they were rotting away instantly seeped through the area. A sharp glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. The only thing in his line of sight was this palace. He could no longer see that old Mo Luo. Great Yu, Su Ming looked at the palace. He did not cast the power to cause time to flow away. Instead, he just looked at the palace, and a cold smile curled up on his lips. The presence spreading from this palace from Great Yu was incredibly pure, but was far too little. Perhaps this art would be effective against other people, but to Su Ming, this illusion was too fake. Because he was one of the incredibly few people who had truly seen the Great Yu dynasty, a person who had truly seen the imperial city and its numerous palaces. How could he possibly be shocked by this mere imitation? All of this was just like a fool trying to teach a fish how to swim. Chapter 534, The Strongest Spear. But it did give me an inspiration, so divine abilities can be cast this way. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He looked at the palace in this place and closed his eyes. After some time, when he opened his eyes again, an illusion appeared in his eyes. In the illusion, he saw a palace, a gigantic moat, and that was Great Yu Imperial City. In that illusion was Great Yu's main palace, and also that Great Yu South Morus Alba palace that had come to this world in the form of an illusion. Almost the instant these palaces and the city appeared in Su Ming's eyes, he took a step forward, and right at the moment his foot landed, the illusory palace before his eyes crumbled and shattered with a bang. How brittle is the copy compared to the fake? The moment the Great Yu South Morus Alba palace shattered, Su Ming sensed something. As it collapsed and turned into pieces that sliced through the air around him, it was as if a veil had been lifted from his eyes, revealing Xianxia Civ Island lying behind this illusory world, as well as Mo Luo, who was already halfway into the temple, but whose body suddenly started trembling before he coughed out a mouthful of blood. Mo Luo was shaken to the core and his heart was filled with astonishment. He had not placed his hopes on the power of Great Yu to be able to kill this person. After all, this art was just an illusion and an imitation from what he had seen in the clan. Still, he had been confident that it could hold this person back for some time. Yet, the truth was before his eyes. Only 3 breaths had gone by since he cast this art to the moment the illusion of Great Yu shattered. Those 3 breaths felt like the world had collapsed. The yellow light in the sky faded out, and as Mo Luo coughed out a mouthful of blood, a tile fell from the darkened yellow light in the sky. It was a crimson tile. A primal and ancient air could be sensed from it. The illusion of Great Yu had been brought up precisely because of this item. When it fell on the ground, it cracked, and looked as if it was about to break apart. Impossible! The clan master once said that no one can leave the illusion of Great Yu within the span of a few breaths. Even when I used this against the extremely powerful warriors, they would also be trapped for at least the length of burning half an incense stick. Shock overwhelmed Mo Luo's heart once again. At the moment he coughed out blood, he immediately stepped into the temple without hesitation. But before he could even manage to place his foot on the ground, the world around him instantly started distorting, and within those distortions, he saw, much to his shock, the very same sight that Bao Shan had seen previously. He saw time flowing back, saw the world breaking into pieces before gathering up once again, saw his own feet moving backwards, and saw his body leaving the temple. He also saw Su Ming lifting his right index finger and pointing it at his chest, just like when he did to critically injure Bao Shan. Sharp pain shot through his entire body, causing blood to trickle out of the corners of his lips. He was completely unable to resist, as if his will had been separated from his body as time flowed backwards. When he had been moving forward just moments ago, he had not detected any sort of danger. That was why there was not any sign of struggle when he moved forward just now. Yet at this moment, as time flowed backwards, his body still maintained that non-resisting posture, causing every single part of him to be exposed to destruction. This was destiny's strongest aspect. Mo Luo's soul was almost shattered. He had clearly seen Bao Shan's demise just moments prior, and now he was in the same state. He could not resist, he could not dodge. It was as if he had turned into a puppet that was controlled by someone else, and time flowed forward and backwards interchangeably. He would be continuously injured until he died. It was especially so when he was struck by Destiny's finger. When blood flowed out of his mouth, a huge force crashed into his body, but before he could even take a few steps backwards, the world before him immediately shattered once again, turning into pieces before gathering together once more. Everything was a cycle, a repetition, and this was enough to make any person strongly feel as if their minds were about to shatter. I can't let this go on, or else I'll definitely die. This person is definitely one of the 3 great berserkers in South Morning. He gained his fame many years ago. He definitely has more tricks up his sleeve. When Mo Luo saw his body falling back and Su Ming walking towards him to jab him with his finger a second time, his terror reached its peak. He had fought and killed for his entire life, but he had never met such a strange divine ability. Once he linked it to Su Ming's identity, he started falling into hysteria in the midst of his terror in this life-threatening crisis. Almost the instant Su Ming delivered his second jab on the center of Mo Luo's brows, the old man's eyes immediately turned red. He might be unable to control his body from being absorbed by time, he might be unable to execute his divine abilities, but he could make his berserker soul break. Right when Su Ming's hand touched the center of his brows, veins popped up all over Mo Luo's body. With a bang, a power that screamed with a desire to burn everything erupted from his body. The strength of that power came from Mo Luo burning his own cultivation base, and that power would erupt with the price of his level of cultivation falling from the later stage of the Berserker Soul Realm to the middle stage. The instant Mo Luo started burning his cultivation base, Su Ming's finger landed on his body, and when he tumbled backwards while coughing up blood, as the world in his vision shattered and rebuilt itself, time froze for a moment, causing him to roar and charge out desperately of this cycle that brought him immense terror. He could not even be bothered wiping off the blood on his mouth the instant he rushed out. He knew that his chance would only last for an instant. The sight of himself being buried in that never-ending cycle had caused him extreme terror, and the moment he rushed out, he did not hesitate for even a moment to form a seal with both his hands and pointing it forward. The 7 emotions of life: joy, anger, worry, desire, grief, fear, shock. As Mo Luo shouted and pointed towards Su Ming through the air, 7 wisps of smoke immediately spread out from his fingertips. His expression started changing from twisted madness to glee, then from glee to anger, then to anxiety, before changing to longing, sorrow, fear, and shock. These 7 expressions reflected the art of the 7 emotions of life. The instant they showed up on his face, the 7 wisps of smoke that spread out from his fingertips turned into 7 shadows made of fog in midair, charging towards Su Ming. At that moment, due to Mo Luo burning his own cultivation base, he managed to resist the power dragging him into the cycle, causing Su Ming to be unable to use the art of the past to cause Mo Luo's art to flow in reverse. He was still calm though. 12 breaths had gone by since he became Destiny, and his time limit was near. 7 emotions. Su Ming remained silent. With aloofness shining in his eyes, he did not dodge, but instead walked towards Mo Luo, who was now full of openings. The moment he came closer, joy's shadow became the first among the 7 emotions to close in on him, but right after it went into his body, it slipped out, as if there was no such thing as happiness within him. This caught Mo Luo by surprise. The next instant, anger's shadow closed in, but once it touched Su Ming, it also slipped out of his body just like joy did before. Su Ming remained as composed as ever, and not a single change in emotion could be found on him as he moved closer still. This. Mo Luo was stunned, completely silent, especially when he saw the shadows of worry, sorrow, fear, and shock seemingly not being able to see Su Ming and passing through him the instant they touched him. At that instant, Mo Luo's terror reached its peak. That's impossible. As long as you're human, it's impossible for you to not possess those 7 emotions. Mo Luo roared, and in his shock, he hastily retreated. However, in his panic, he did not notice that even though all 7 emotions had eventually disappeared, there was one wisp of emotion that had stayed for a moment when it entered Su Ming's body before it, too, disappeared. That emotion was longing. During that instant, what appeared in Su Ming's mind was Dark Mountain, his elder, Bai Ling, the 9th summit, his master, and the other people. When Mo Luo saw Su Ming closing in on him and lifting his left hand, the feeling that he was immersed in an endless cycle and the false impression that the world was shattering into pieces appeared once again. In fear, Mo Luo grit his teeth. The burning of his cultivation base in his body became even stronger, causing his level of cultivation to fall from the middle stage of the Berserker Soul Realm straight down to the initial stage. The power formed from the burning of his cultivation base turned into an explosive burst, causing him to take a step forward as he roared. Just as he was about to step into the temple, a flicker of light shone in Su Ming's eyes. His appearance began rapidly changing. His time as destiny was near its end, but he remained calm. He no longer moved forward, but instead, as violet light shone on his entire body, he equipped the Undertaker of Evil's armor while he was still destiny. In the blink of an eye, Su Ming's entire body was surrounded by violet light. When he lifted his right hand, a long spear manifested, causing him to bring out the Undertaker of Evil's power as destiny for the first time. At that moment, Mo Luo had broken through Su Ming's time reversal with the power created from burning his cultivation base. After paying a huge price, he finally managed to return to the temple. The instant he stepped inside, he spread his arms wide open and let out a shocking roar. Legacy of my ancestors, fill up your 3rd-generation disciples' Mo Luo body, and help me reproduce our clan's glory. As Mo Luo roared, the memorial tablets in the temple suddenly started shining with a piercing dark light. Within it were wisps upon wisps of soul fragments whose faces could not be seen clearly. The appearance of those souls caused the temple to instantly become colder. Then, as if a gust of freezing wind had blown through, the soul fragments' memorial tablets started crumbling and charging towards Mo Luo, crawling madly into him through every single part of his body. The power of Mo Luo's presence started shooting upwards. His presence shot up from the initial stage of the Berserker Soul Realm to the middle stage, then reached the later stage of the Berserker Soul Realm, and still continued climbing upwards. But it did not end there. As pain appeared on Mo Luo's face, his power climbed up once again and he screamed in pain, but he did not reach great completion, just the pinnacle of the later stage for the Berserker Soul Realm. All of this was due to him burning his own cultivation base, or else he would have been able to obtain the power of great completion for an incredibly short period of time in the midst of the mad climb of power. Mo Luo's eyes were bloodshot. His body was filled with a pain that made him feel as if he was about to be torn apart, making him descend into further madness. As his level of cultivation climbed upwards, he turned around and roared towards Su Ming while charging at him. As destiny, Su Ming moved towards Mo Luo while dressed in the Undertaker of Evil's armor while holding onto the long violet spear in his right hand. An instant before his body reverted from being destiny, he tossed that long spear out of his hand, and a bang rang through the air. That throw was the strongest spear attack Su Ming could muster while he was destiny and had the Undertaker of Evil's armor equipped. It could even be considered a spear attack that was unmatched. If anyone really wanted to compare the power of that spear throw, then they would find that it had already surpassed the great completion of the Berserker Soul Realm, and even contained a hint of the power of life cultivation. Chapter 535. Su Ming. What is life cultivation? Life cultivation is a cultivation of people's own lives, which means a cultivation of their vitality and their fates. All of this is simply to have complete mastery over themselves, to learn where their own weaknesses lie, and from there, perfect themselves and become a stronger existence standing at the pinnacle of the world. Even if Su Ming could bring out power that was equivalent to those who had attained great completion in the Berserker Soul Realm when he was destiny, but that was all. There was a deep chasm separating him from reaching the power of life cultivation. It was originally difficult for him to cross it, but the appearance of the Undertaker of Evil's armor had allowed him to gather all his combat abilities together when destiny disappeared and fly over that chasm. Even if the him before had attempted this charge, it would still have been hard for him to produce such a shocking spear throw of unparalleled power, because he had yet to understand the true meaning of life cultivation. His heart had yet to reach the level to be able to cross that chasm. He had still been caught in a daze, confused by who he was, chained down by his memories, still stubbornly trying to figure out his own identity. However, when he was on the way to scour Civ Island, Su Ming had gained an epiphany as he traveled across the ocean and laughed. His own words had also caused him to rise to a higher level, just like a caterpillar breaking out of its cocoon and turning into a butterfly. It was a metamorphosis of his soul. It also let Su Ming take the most important, most crucial step towards becoming a truly powerful warrior. Since the world calls me Destiny, then from now on, I, Su Ming, will be Destiny. This was a shout Su Ming had let out in his life, a shout declaring how he would live his life as he laughed at the heavens and earth. Those words resonated with the smile on the lips of Great Yu's court diviner. His words also formed a power that could overturn the universe, just like the words the court diviner had carved deeply into the spine. When you learn who you are no longer you. When you no longer know who you will be you. Su Ming's metamorphosis and his epiphany towards his own soul may seem nothing special, but in truth, this was the crucial key that allowed him to bring out this hint of presence of life cultivation. The instant the spear was thrown out, it shook the sky and earth. It was as if this sort of thing was so rare in this vast world and the great land of the Berserkers that it had not been seen for years. Its appearance shook the skies, and as Su Ming threw out his spear, the entire sky roared and trembled. For the first time, the layers of clouds that had covered the sky for years were blasted away with a loud boom. They tumbled backwards, causing the sky to reveal its first true rays of sunlight after the calamity, and as the clouds were torn apart, more rays of sunlight shone down. As the sky howled, the sea around the island also roared. When those loud roars reverberated in the air, it was as if the sky and sea were trembling because of that hint of life cultivation's presence. Almost the moment this hint of presence shook the sky and earth, causing the heavens to reveal themselves, several spots in the land of South Morning erupted forth with a powerful presence. The first spot was one of the 3 pieces of land where Western Sea Clan was located. That place was barren, and at the top of the mountain behind Western Sea Clan was a rather handsome middle-aged man wearing a blue robe with a black dragon embroidered on it. He was one of the 3 great berserkers of South Morning, Guru Li Long. His eyes were originally closed, but at that moment, they flew open, and right then, brilliant light spread through the sky over the land. It was as if the sky had also closed its eyes, and had opened them at the same time Li Long opened his. This is the presence of life. Li Long looked into the distance in a daze and only mumbled under his breath after a long while. At the same time, there was a small-sized tribe on another piece of land in the land of South Morning. Chimney smoke could be seen rising from the tribe, and the sounds of children playing could be heard faintly from within. In one of the beast skin tents of the tribe flew around notes from a zun. They came from an old man who had opened his eyes and was playing a zun, but his eyes were dull and lifeless, just like a blind man's. His song echoed in the air, and a smile gradually curled up on his lips. This was the situation in South Morning, and in Eastern Wasteland's mainland, strong waves of ripples also appeared in several spots at that instant. All the changes in the weather were all because there was a hint of life cultivation in the spear Su Ming threw. On Scour Civ Island, Mo Luo, who had fused with the will of the clan's ancestors in the temple and had recovered his power to the pinnacle of the later stage in the Berserker Soul realm, started roaring, his face twisted with ferociousness. The instant he charged toward Su Ming, he saw a spear coming right towards him. The long violet spear, the killing intent that burned the skies, and that presence that made Mo Luo's heart and soul tremble violently, even causing fear to rise uncontrollably in his heart despite his madness. His fear was reflected clearly on his face and his eyes, and even crawled into his ancestors' will in his body, causing them to explode. Those wills might have originally come from those who had died, but even the wills of the deceased went into a state of frenzy once they sensed the presence of life cultivation on Su Ming's spear. Almost in an instant, the The wisps of shadows that had crawled into Mo Luo's body just moments prior crawled out of his body and gathered together before him, turning into an indistinct figure. That figure lifted his hand and pushed towards the incoming spear. The instant both sides clashed, vicious shudders wrecked the figure's body and he disintegrated with a bang. Just the force from his collapse caused Mo Luo to stagger a few steps backwards and cough out a huge mouthful of blood. Shock filled his face, and when the wills of his ancestors left his body, his level of cultivation fell back to the initial stage of the Berserker Soul Realm once again, and was even showing signs of falling further. "Clan Master, save me!" At that moment, fear had completely overwhelmed Mo Luo. He was afraid, truly afraid. He could not believe that the spear would be so shocking. The power of his ancestors gathered in the treasure his clan had given him had not even been able to block it for even an instant. A life-threatening sense of danger that was even stronger than what he felt when he was still caught in the cycles of repetition crashed into Mo Luo's heart, causing his face to turn stark pale. Not a hint of blood could be seen on his face, and he even started trembling all over his body. The long violet spear shot through the body manifested from the gathering of all the wills belonging to Mo Luo's ancestors and charged straight towards the temple. But the moment it rushed inside, a great amount of life force spread out from the temple, as if something dead had just been resurrected. But even so, it did not matter. Almost the instant life force erupted, a loud bang that surged into the sky reverberated in the air, and the entire temple started cracking, inch by inch, and with that loud bang it shattered in pieces and exploded. The only one left was Mo Luo, standing alone on the ground as he coughed up blood once more. His face withered away, and was filled with shock and terror as he continued retreating. However, Su Ming's spear still did not stop. It charged straight towards Mo Luo, and during that instant, the old man's desperate plea for his clanmaster's help rang into the air. The plea for help instantly made a vortex appear before Mo Luo, just as Su Ming's spear closed in on him. The appearance of that vortex was incredibly sudden, and a hand had even stretched out from it to grab Mo Luo. By the looks of it, that hand wanted to save Mo Luo. It was an old arm. The instant it appeared, a presence belonging to a berserker who had attained great completion in the Berserker Soul Realm was revealed distinctly, and that was the true presence of a berserker who had reached great completion. Yet the moment this hand stretched out of the vortex, grabbed Mo Luo, whose expression filled with delight and excitement from having escaped death, and was just about to drag him inside, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. The long spear that was rushing over closed in within an instant and pierced the vortex. Right then, the person who had grabbed Mo Luo from the vortex stretched out another hand and pointed towards the tip of the spear. The instant both sides touched each other, a shocking roar shook the skies, and the finger in the vortex immediately exploded. A muffled groan came from within, and the hint of life cultivation's presence on the long spear blasted forth abruptly. Under that presence, the vortex shattered, and with a bang, Mo Luo's legs instantly turned to dust. His arms suffered the same fate, and even half of his body was disintegrated. Only his head and a small part of his body were left tumbling into the distance. He should not have lived. If Su Ming had not been unwilling to kill him and hadn't gathered most of the strength of his spear on that vortex when it appeared, Mo Luo would definitely have died. As the vortex shattered, Su Ming's spear shot forth and charged inside. When a bang that seemed to be running through an isolated space traveled out of the crumbling vortex, an old voice filled with fury and shock swiftly traveled out. "Who are you?" "Su Ming, of South Morning." This was Su Ming's answer. He did not bother with any form of disguise, neither did he hide his own name. Right after he destroyed Xianxia Island, he openly announced his name to the voice in the vortex that belonged to that old Eastern Wastelander who had attained great completion in the Berserker Soul Realm. The moment his voice traveled forth, the vortex shattered completely and disappeared from Xianxia Island. Immediately, a flash of light appeared in Su Ming's hands, and the long spear he threw out manifested in his grasp once more. The Undertaker of Evil's spear could take a physical and illusory form. As long as Su Ming held that transparent jade slip in his hands, the spear would forever be in his grasp. Mo Luo's presence was weak. A large amount of his life force had flowed away. If it had not been for him originally being in the pinnacle of the later stage in the Berserker Soul Realm, then he would have definitely died with these irreparable wounds. Yet even so, he was still hanging by the last threads of his life. As a clan elder of Eastern Wasteland's All Entities clan, Mo Luo had come to the sea with a mission. Not only was he given a large amount of treasures, his clan had also given him this temple to serve as his strongest offensive and defensive power. To all entities' clan, this was already their greatest power. Not a single accident should occur. Even if he ran into the 3 great berserkers of South Morning, he would still be safe. However, they did not expect that there was still another person besides the 3 great berserkers in the land of South Morning. This person was destined to have his name spread through the world after this battle. This person was destined to bring about a calamity after he slaughtered the entire Scour Civ Island. This person was also destined to gain the attention of all the clans, tribes, and the powerful warriors in Eastern Wasteland's mainland, and he would make their hearts tremble in fear, shock, and alarm. This person's name would also shake the entire Eastern Wastelands after this battle. His name was Su Ming.